All right, our last set of amendments here. Let's get through these. Whew, take a big breath. Here we go. We're going to go fast. Amendment number 18. Liquor abolished. This is called prohibition. Prohibition. They actually made it a constitutional law that you cannot drink alcohol. After 1 year, the manufacture, sale, or transportation of intoxicating liquors with the importation thereof and from the United States and all territory object is prohibited. I skipped through that fast. But this is when they outlawed alcohol. This is interesting because that's kind of a strange particular thing to put in the Constitution, but they thought alcohol was so bad that they just need to get rid of it, and the only way to really get rid of it was a constitutional amendment. As you can see, it was repealed by Amendment 21. They gave up on the idea. But in 1919, they did. And through the whole 20s, the whole roaring 20s, alcohol was illegal, and people had lots of illegal alcohol parties, but they had to hide it from the government. Women's suffrage. So in 1920, the right of citizens of the United States to vote shall not be denied or abridged in the United States by any state on account of sex. So men and women can vote now. Excuse me, I need to sneeze, I think. If I sneeze in the middle of this, get over with it. You'll just have to deal with it. Hopefully there won't be like little water spots happen on the video. That'd be gross. So women can vote. Now in 1920, finally women can vote. So black, white, men and women can all vote. What's the voting age still? At this time, it's still 21 years. 21 years. If you're a man or a woman, black or white, doesn't matter. You can vote. Amendment number 20. Presidential congressional terms ratified. Now before this, how many times could you be elected to president? Many times. Now most people only ran for president twice, and that was because of George Washington. George Washington was elected president 2 times, so he served for 8 years. And after that he said, that's enough for anybody. That, to do more than that is kind of just, it's not right. You shouldn't be president that long. 8 years is enough, I'm going home. And everybody after him kind of followed that tradition. They followed that tradition of just only running twice until we get to Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt won president 4 times, and this happened during the Depression and World War II, where people just kind of thought it would be good to have, consistent government, consistent president, consistent leadership during these hard times. So he was elected 4 times. He died in the middle of his 4th term. He didn't finish it. But after that, people said, we should put it in the Constitution where they'll only have, they can only be done twice. I'm looking at the wrong amendment. Scratch all that I'm talking about. This is the terms ratified. We're going to skip this one a little bit. This actually tells you when they start, when the terms start. Ooh, strike that up as a big mistake of mine. So deal with it. We'll get to the other one. So the mistake, this is not that amendment. This is the one that tells you when the vice president starts. This tells you exactly when they're sworn into office and how that takes care of. Remember, the Constitution, it was a little bit vague about how that worked. They decided they wanted to make it not so vague. So let's go on, because we're not to the president term limits. Oh, here it is. See, this is what I was talking about down here. Oh man, what a mistake. Amendment 21, let's do that one first though. Amendment 21 repealed Amendment 18, where they say the 18th article or amendment of the Constitution is hereby repealed. You can sell alcohol, and alcohol is now legal. So 1933, so it was about 13 years that alcohol was illegal in the United States. Now let's do presidential term limits. Oh, my mistake before. No person shall be elected to office more than twice. So now you can only be elected twice. If you served for president more than half of someone else's term, so like if you were the vice president and you took over as president for longer than 2 years, that counts as one of them. But if it's less than 2 years, it doesn't count as one of them. So we have that. Now, so presidential term limits. Presidents can only be elected twice. A lot of people say for senators and representatives, we should also have term limits. Right now, senators and representatives don't. They can be elected as many times as they want. But president can only be elected twice. But there's lots of people who say, you know what? We should do the same thing for senators and representatives. Give them a term limit so that they don't become career politicians and they don't serve forever, but that we keep rotating through people. So that's a debate that you could get into, whether would it be good to give senators and representatives term limits as well. Going on, Amendment 23. Now, remember, when you vote for president, each state gets a certain amount of votes. But if you live in Washington, D.C., it did not get any votes because it's not a state. Well, this amendment changed that in 1961. The District of Columbia, or Washington, D.C., shall appoint a number of electors to vote for president. So now the people in Washington, D.C., can vote for the president too, which kind of makes sense. It's kind of silly that they were left out of that. But they were just because they weren't a state. But now they get to vote for president too. I think they get 3 votes if I remember right. I don't think it's more than 4. But Washington, D.C. does get some votes. You can vote for president if you're there. Poll tax bar. Now we're getting to, here's a civil rights amendment. Poll tax barred. Now remember, you have to let everybody vote, but different states had different requirements of how you could register for votes. Some people made you take tests to register votes. Some people made you pay money and fees to vote. Some people made you do different things. Some people, sometimes it was kind of crazy to register to vote. Well, with this one, the rights of citizens to vote in any primary or other election for president or vice president, for electors for president or vice president, or for senator or representatives of Congress shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or any state by reason of failure to pay a poll tax or other tax. In other words, when you register to vote, it has to be free. So they did that because they said, well, the poor people, especially poor black people, couldn't afford to register to vote, so then they wouldn't get to vote. And that was kind of one of the tricks people would use. But now, registering to vote has to be free. So free voting in the United States. And it's constitutionally mandated. You have to be able to vote for free. Presidential disability. Now, this one's in the Constitution itself. It does say what happens if the president is removed from office, the vice president comes in, or if the president can't serve, it comes in. This one actually just kind of clarifies what the process is. So here's the process of what happens if the president can't fulfill his government, or can't be the president anymore. There's a process. So it does say here, if the president's removed from office, the vice president shall become president. And the vice president shall nominate a new if the vice president becomes president, he shall nominate a new vice president that has to be approved by Congress. So that wasn't really outlined before in the Constitution. It wasn't quite clear what exactly would happen. Could the vice president choose a new vice president? Here it says yes, it's clear. The old vice president, if he becomes president, can choose a new vice president, and Congress just has to approve it. Now, here's for temporary changes. The president can become, or the vice president can become president if the president can't do the job anymore. But what if the president can't do the job for just a little while? Here's the process. So whenever the president transmits to the president pro tempore of the Senate, so the president sends a letter to the Senate and the Speaker of the House of Representatives his written declaration that he is unable to discharge the powers and duties of his office. And until he transmits to them a written declaration to the contrary, such powers and duties shall be discharged by the vice president as acting president. So if the president sends a letter to both of the houses of Congress and says, I can't do my job right now, the vice president's going to do my job, then the vice president immediately becomes the president until the old president says, no, I'm ready, I can do my job again. Does that ever happen? Well, yes, actually. For instance, if the president had to go into surgery, maybe the president was going to be in surgery all day, and everybody knew it. The president can say, on this day, I am going to be in surgery, I can't be the president. The president this day is going to be The vice president will be the president. And so for that one day, the vice president can become the president and do anything, since the president can't, what if war happens? Do they have to wait for the president to wake up? No, the vice president can act like the president just for that day. So if the president tells the Congress that he can't be the president for a while, then the vice president immediately becomes president. Now here's a second one though. But what if the president is crazy and won't send the letter himself? Well, whenever the vice president and a majority of either the principal officers or executive departments of each of the bodies of Congress may by law provide and transmit a letter to the Senate and the House, their written declaration that the president is unable to discharge powers and duties of his office, the vice president shall immediately assume powers and duties of the office of acting president. So the vice president can send a letter to and say, hey, look, I don't think the president's ready. Or I don't think the president's good right now. The president's kind of crazy. He's going nuts. He can't be the president anymore. And as soon as he does that, the vice president becomes president. Now, but what if the vice president's lying? So here we go. Thereafter, if the president sends a letter to the Senate and the House, his written declaration that no inability exists. So the president says, hey, look, I'm fine. I don't know what's wrong with him. I'm just fine. As soon as the president does that, he shall resume the powers and duties of his office. So if the vice president says, hey, look, the president's nuts, he can't do his job, he becomes the president automatically right then. But if the president says, no, I'm just fine, I can do my job, then he becomes the president again. Unless the vice president and his buddies and such a Congress may by law transmit within 4 days to the President and the Senate Speaker of the House their written declaration that the President is unable to discharge his powers and duties for his office. Thereupon, Congress shall decide the issue. So let's say that, maybe the President is getting Alzheimer's disease, and he actually is maybe losing his mind a little bit. Well, the vice president can send a letter and say, hey, look, he's losing too much of his memory. He can't be the president anymore. And the president's like, no, I'm fine. And then the vice president says, no, he's really not fine. After that happens the third time, then Congress decides whether he's okay or not. And they have to assemble within 48 hours if they're not in session. And within 21 days, they have to decide to determine by 2/3 of vote if the president is unable to discharge the powers. Then the vice president goes on. But if they decide that he's fine, the president, or they can't decide that he's bad, if they can't do it with 2/3 majority, if 2/3 of them don't agree the president's can't do it, then the president shall resume the powers of his office. So there's kind of the way that it works. And it's good that there's a specific process now, because before in the Constitution it wasn't exactly clear how that would work, but now there's the specific process. All right, the last two, let's do these ones fast. The voting age, this one's easy. The voting age is set to 18, so now 18-year-olds can vote. So the right to citizens of the United States who are 18 years of age or older to vote shall not be denied or abridged by the United States or by any state on account of age. So as soon as you're 18 years old, you can vote, and they can't say you're too old to vote because you can't be denied on account of age. So now we vote when we're 18 instead of 21. Last one. No law varying the compensation for services of senators and representatives shall take effect until an election of representatives shall have intervened. So nobody can pass a law, or Congress can't give itself a raise until after the next election. So, if they say, we're going to give ourselves a huge raise, and everybody hates it, well, they have a chance to vote them out of office before that raise happens. So Congress can't give a raise until after the next election. They can't give themselves a raise right then. So those are the constitutional amendments. Whew! Don't worry, there'll be lots and lots of quiz questions on them. So make sure you've gone through them, that you kind of understand each one, that you have some good notes about some of the things we brought up about each amendment, and be ready for the quizzes, and be thinking about What type of amendment would you add to the Constitution? If you wanted to change the Constitution, now that you've studied the whole thing, how would you change the Constitution? That is an intriguing question. What type of amendment would you put in there? Or maybe you're fine, I don't know. But be thinking about that. What type of things do you think still is not very good in the Constitution that you would change? All right, hopefully you enjoyed those lessons. Get ready for your quizzes.